in 1986, right, a director walks into a pitch meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically looks at these studio executives and tells them he wants his next film to be Apocalypse Now with jets.
Which is just an insane pitch.
Completely insane. I mean, he wanted the psychological rot, the madness of Colonel Kurtz.
Right.
But somehow, fast forward, and he's forced to shoot these high-fiving guys playing beach volleyball in aviators.
Totally oiled up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the studio, well, they wanted a shiny summer commercial, not a dark war epic.
Yeah, they wanted a hit.
And the production was chaos. I mean, the director's brother was allegedly on set just running a camera shooting slow-motion footage for days after being explicitly fired.
Just refusing to leave.
Refusing to leave. And the lead actor's hair famously changes lengths and, textures in the middle of a single conversational scene.
It's so obvious when you look for it.
It is. By all the established laws of cinema, logic, even just basic project management, the 1986 film Top Gun should have been a complete unmitigated disaster. And yet, we are talking about a movie that essentially rewired the global pop culture mainframe.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, it is the defining aviation movie of a generation.
Oh, without a doubt.
And arguably, one of the most culturally resilient films of the late 20th century.
Yeah.
But what we are examining today for this deep dive isn't just the film itself.
Right.
We're looking at a really comprehensive, highly analytical, and frankly, deeply personal review by the YouTuber Sean Chandler.
Yeah, his video essay is fantastic.
It really is. And what makes his breakdown so vital, I think, is his willingness to look directly at the structural, the foundational cracks of the movie, while at the same time acknowledging its absolute emotional triumph.
And that's exactly the tension we're navigating today. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because how does a movie with a historically troubled production, aggressive tonal whiplash, and violently competing creative visions somehow transcend the sum of its broken parts to become legendary?
That's the million-dollar question.
It really is. And I mean, in my line of work, dealing with investigative reporting and journalism, you quickly learn that the official narrative of how something was made is almost never the truth.
Oh, definitely not.
You look for the friction. Like when you have producers, writers, and directors all pulling a multi-million-dollar project in completely opposite directions, you usually end up with a sterile, compromised mess.
Right, because everyone's just canceling each other out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Surviving that process is rare, but defining a whole decade through that process, that is practically a statistical impossibility.
It really is. And to understand that statistical impossibility, Chandler's review suggests we have to start somewhere, well, entirely unscientific.
Which is
personal nostalgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. He opens his entire analysis by acknowledging a profound, inescapable bias right off the bat.
Which I respect so much.
Me too. He maps out his earliest memories of watching movies, and he notes that while most of his early childhood cinematic experiences just blur together into a vague haze,
Yeah.
watching Top Gun stands out with this, crystalline clarity.
Wow.
It wasn't just a movie playing in the background. It was a specific, localized event with his family.
Yes, and the memory he shares to illustrate this is incredible.
Funny.
Honestly, as a parent of 2 kids myself, it hit me right in the chest.
I bet.
Because he remembers sitting in the living room with his family, right? The movie's playing, the jets are flying around, everyone's engaged.
Just a nice family movie night.
Exactly. And then the film transitions to the infamous, heavily stylized love scene.
Oh, no.
And his parents just entirely lose their minds.
They panic.
Total panic. They yell at him to get out of the room, and they physically eject him from the viewing experience.
That is amazing.
He says he recalls being utterly bewildered, like having no conceptual framework for why the mood in the room just went from 0 to 60.
Right? Because he's just a kid.
Yeah. He didn't get it until he grew up and decoded what was actually happening on screen.
It's such a hilarious anecdote, but mechanically it does something really fascinating to a developing brain.
What do you mean?
Well, when you're a child and your parents react with that level of sudden, intense panic to a piece of media, they are inadvertently applying a massive psychological highlighter to it.
A psychological highlighter. I love that.
Yeah. It ceases to be just a film and becomes like forbidden lore.
Oh, totally. Because you're like, wait, what is this thing I'm not allowed to see?
Exactly. The amygdala fires up, the emotional state heightens, and the memory of that media is burned into the cognitive map much deeper than a movie they just, allowed him to sit through passively.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The suddenness of it is what causes the shock.
Right.
Because you think you've curated a safe, high-octane movie about fast planes for family movie night.
You've got the popcorn.
You've got the popcorn, everyone is relaxed,
Yeah.
and then the lighting drops, the blue filters come out.
That Berlin song starts playing.
Yes. Take My Breath Away just starts echoing through the room, and the silhouettes appear.
And you're just like, abort.
As a parent, your internal alarm system just starts shrieking. You're lunging for the remote, you're making up excuses about bedtime, you're shuffling them into the kitchen.
It's chaos.
It is sheer, visceral terror.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you've completely lost control of the environment.
Right.
But you're right. From the kid's perspective, for you listening, think about it. That abrupt censorship makes the movie mythical.
And that mythical status didn't just exist visually for him, it existed auditorily too.
Well, the soundtrack.
Chandler notes that his connection to the film was heavily reinforced through the soundtrack, which he owned on vinyl.
Of course. It was the 80s.
Right, and this introduces a completely different layer of media consumption.
Yeah.
When you engage with a soundtrack on vinyl, it requires physical interaction.
You can't just hit shuffle.
Exactly. You are dropping the needle, you are flicking the record, you are staring at the album sleeve.
Right.
It demands a level of active listening that streaming a playlist today simply does not.
That makes a lot of sense. He actually talks about listening to that record so obsessively that he memorized every single lyric.
I believe it.
But the best part is the childhood logic he applied to it.
Oh, the singing thing.
Yes, because he was a kid and, didn't have access to Wikipedia or an understanding of how Hollywood licensing works.
Right, he didn't know who Kenny Loggins was.
Exactly. He simply assumed that Tom Cruise actually sang all the rock songs on the soundtrack.
Which is just so pure.
He figured the star of the movie must be the one performing the music. Like Tom Cruise is up there belting out Danger Zone.
It makes sense to a 10-year-old.
It does. And the only exception in his mind was Take My Breath Away, which he graciously assumed was sung by Kelly McGillis.
Obviously. She's the female lead, so she gets the ballad.
Naturally. It's just a charming cognitive map.
It really is.
But more importantly, I think it perfectly illustrates the central conflict of reviewing a legacy film.
How so?
Well, when a piece of art is that fundamentally woven into the fabric of your youth, when it helped develop your very baseline for cinematic taste, separating the objective reality of the art from the subjective warmth of the nostalgia is incredibly difficult.
Oh, it's nearly impossible.
You are essentially being asked to review your own childhood.
Yeah.
I want to push on that concept for a second, though.
Sure.
If our early exposures to art are wrapped up in these highly emotional, biologically cemented memories like getting kicked out of a living room or staring at a vinyl record spinning on the floor, how much do you think that permanently disables our critical faculties later in life?
That's a great question.
Like, can a critic ever actually decouple the film from the feeling of being 10 years old?
Well, I would argue that absolute sterile objectivity in art criticism is not only a myth, but it's also entirely undesirable.
Really? Undesirable.
Yeah, I mean, art is designed to elicit a response.
Right.
If we strip away the emotional resonance, we aren't reviewing art anymore. We're just cataloging structural components.
That's a fair point. We're just looking at the math.
Exactly. And nostalgia is particularly potent because it bypasses the critical, analytical parts of our brain and connects directly to the emotional center.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear the opening synthesizer chord of the Top Gun anthem, your brain doesn't objectively say, ah, yes, a 1986 action film.
No, not at all.
Your brain says, I am 10 years old, I am sitting on the carpet, and I feel safe.
Wow, yeah. That's exactly it.
And what makes Chandler's review so effective is how he weaponizes that bias.
How so? By admitting it up front.
Precisely.
Right.
By explicitly telling the viewer about the vinyl record, his theories about Tom Cruise singing and his parents' panic, he is establishing a baseline of immense credibility.
Because he's not hiding it.
Right. He is essentially saying, look, I'm viewing this through rose-colored glasses, but I am going to take them off and we are going to look at the structural flaws together. That self-correction makes his subsequent critique much more devastating and his praise much more meaningful.
Because we know he understands his own psychological blind spots.
Exactly.
He isn't trying to gaslight the audience into thinking this is, like, highbrow cinema.
No, not at
He
all.
actively leans into the reality of the film's nature. And that brings us to his categorization of the movie.
Right.
He doesn't call it a masterpiece of dramatic fiction. He specifically defines it as an amazing 80s product.
Yes.
And that word product feels incredibly loaded.
It is a highly deliberate semantic choice on his part.
Yeah.
When we talk about cinema, we often differentiate between timeless art and time capsule art.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, timeless art deals with universal human conditions that resonate regardless of the era.
So films like The Godfather or 12 Angry Men.
Exactly. Time capsule art, however, is inextricably linked to the aesthetic, political, and cultural momentum of the exact moment it was created.
I see.
Chandler is acknowledging that Top Gun is not a Scorsese-level masterclass in subtle narrative.
Far from it.
It is a product manufactured to deliver a specific feeling.
And he draws a direct parallel to Rocky the Feet.
Oh, perfect comparison.
Yeah, he mentions that he used to go to his local library just to check out the Rocky Feet soundtrack on vinyl.
Of course.
And he links these two films because they operate on the exact same frequency.
You really do.
They capture the unadulterated, raw energy of the 1980s.
Yeah.
In journalism, we call that looking for the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
You know, the defining spirit or mood of a particular period. Top Gun is the ultimate 1980s zeitgeist on film.
It's a very specific cocktail, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You have driving, synthesized rock and roll. You have rapid-fire editing that mirrors the rise of MTV. Pacing that completely abandons traditional scene structure, high melodrama, and a very aggressive, almost jingoistic sense of heroism.
And, crucially, an absolute abandonment of subtlety in favor of repetition.
Oh, the repetition is wild.
Chandler points out a detail that would get you failed in any modern screenwriting or directing course.
Right.
Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone plays continuously throughout the runtime of the movie.
He jokes that it plays roughly 1,000 times.
And honestly, it doesn't feel like an exaggeration.
No, it really doesn't.
In a traditional narrative structure, you don't reuse a needle drop that aggressively because it exhausts the audience and breaks immersion.
Right. It becomes distracting.
But in an 80s product, the music isn't there to support the narrative. The narrative is frequently paused to support the music.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. The narrative pauses for the music.
The music acts as a Pavlovian bell. And Chandler uses the legendary beach volleyball scene as the ultimate proof of this concept.
Let's dissect that scene because it is fascinating.
It's iconic.
You have these guys oiled up playing aggressive beach volleyball in jeans.
In jeans, in the sand.
Right. High-fiving, screaming, all set to another rock track, playing with the boys. Mechanically, what is happening there? Because it does absolutely zero to advance the plot.
Nothing.
No new information is revealed. No character dynamics shift in a way that couldn't have been handled in, like, 10 seconds of dialogue in a locker room.
Right.
Chandler rightly notes, it's a scene you only could have made in the 80s.
Mechanically, what you are watching is a vibe superseding a story.
A vibe superseding a story.
Yeah. The camera lingers on the physical aesthetic. The editing is synchronized entirely to the beat of the music rather than the emotional beats of the actors.
Yeah.
And the scene functions as a pure dopamine hit. It is selling an aspirational lifestyle.
For you listening, think about what movies from your childhood function purely as vibes and soundtracks rather than logical stories. It's a whole genre.
It really is. And this is where the director's background becomes the Rosetta Stone for understanding the entire film.
Yes.
Tony Scott.
The review notes that director Tony Scott was hired largely based on his commercial work.
Right. And in the commercial world, you have 30 seconds to make a consumer desire something.
Exactly.
You don't have time for a 3-act structure or subtle character motivation. You rely on striking visuals, fast cuts, and immediate emotional hooks.
And the producers wanted that slick, high-gloss commercial appeal applied to a 2-hour feature film. They wanted a long commercial.
They wanted an aesthetic that would look incredible on a poster and sound incredible on the radio. But the cognitive dissonance on that set must have been staggering.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Because as Chandler points out, that commercial mandate was not at all aligned with what Tony Scott actually thought he was making.
And here's where it gets really interesting because this part of the production history is just logistically mind-blowing to me.
The pitch.
The pitch. When Tony Scott pitched his vision for this movie to the studio, he described it as Apocalypse Now with jets.
Which is just, I can't even fathom it.
I want us, and you listening, to really sit with that for a second. Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now is a grueling, nightmarish descent into the darkest, most depraved corners of the human psyche during the Vietnam War.
It's heavy.
It is about madness. It is about the absolute collapse of morality. And Tony Scott wanted to take that psychological template but apply it to guys named Goose and Slider playing volleyball.
It is an almost incomprehensible point of reference. Chandler points out how bizarre it is because the final product is the polar opposite of Apocalypse Now.
Completely.
It has no interest in psychological rot or the horrors of war. It is a triumphant, sun-drenched celebration of American air power.
But think about the friction that creates on set. If I'm a journalist investigating a corporate failure and I find out the CEO thought they were building a submarine while the engineering team thought they were building an airplane.
You know exactly why the company's saying.
Exactly. I know why it's saying.
Yeah.
Here, you have writers trying to build a coherent narrative, producers demanding a shiny summer pop culture hit, and a director who is seemingly trying to shoot a gritty psychological war epic.
Right.
Usually when you have competing visions that magnitude, the project doesn't just fail. It becomes unwatchable.
It collapses into a muddled, tonally incoherent mess.
And the chaos wasn't just limited to the thematic vision either.
Oh, no. Chandler brings up a widely circulated, incredibly strange behind-the-scenes anecdote involving Tony Scott's brother.
The highly acclaimed director, Ridley Scott. Yeah, the review notes that Ridley Scott supposedly joked that he was fired multiple times during the making of Top Gun.
Which is wild.
The story goes that he was on set, operating a camera, shooting endless amounts of slow-motion footage.
Right, because the Scotts love their slow-mo.
They really do. And the studio or the producers would get frustrated, they would fire him, and according to the anecdote, he just didn't leave.
He just ignored them.
He simply ignored the fact that he was fired and kept shooting.
It is a legendary piece of Hollywood lore.
Yeah.
Whether it is a slight self-aggrandizing exaggeration or the literal truth, it perfectly illustrates the absolute circus of that production.
Absolutely.
You have a massive, multi-million-dollar studio film dependent on the cooperation of the actual United States military.
Right.
And supposedly the director's brother is just running around as a rogue cameraman defying the producers.
See, logistically, I have to probe that.
Go for it.
How does a studio let a fired guy keep shooting? What about union rules?
Good point.
What about insurance? What about the daily production reports?
Yeah.
The idea that the studio brass would tell a guy to leave, and he just says no and keeps burning through expensive 35mm film stock implies that the producers had completely lost control of the floor.
The inmates were entirely running the asylum.
Yes. So if the writers wanted one thing, the producers wanted another, and the director thought he was making Apocalypse Now.
How did this not end up as an unwatchable disaster?
Which is why the survival of this film is so fascinating. The chaos should have destroyed it.
But it didn't.
No. Instead, the chaos forced a kind of raw, frantic creativity.
Interesting.
When things are failing on a fundamental level, you are forced to invent new ways of surviving. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, nowhere is that more evident than in the actual physical mechanics of filming the jet sequences.
Oh, let's dig into that. Because Chandler points out that filming these dogfights was an absolute technical nightmare.
It was unprecedented. We're talking about real, physical military machines moving at supersonic speeds in a three-dimensional space.
We have to contextualize this for a modern audience, really.
Please do.
Today, if a director wants a shot of an F-14 Tomcat doing an inverted dive over a MiG, they sit in an air-conditioned room.
With a coffee.
Right. They look at a green screen and tell a visual effects team to render the physics exactly how they want them. The camera can theoretically be placed anywhere in the digital sky. In 1986, if you wanted that shot, you had to put a physical camera in the sky, inside another plane, moving at similar speeds.
That sounds terrifying.
And you had to coordinate with military pilots who were trained for combat, not for hitting cinematic marks.
Wow. And their initial attempt to manage this completely fell apart, didn't it?
Completely.
Tony Scott, being a highly visual director, painstakingly drew out these elaborate storyboards.
Beautifully drawn, I'm sure.
Oh, I bet they looked amazing. He mapped out exactly how the dogfights should look on paper. They took those storyboards, went up in the air, shot the footage, brought it back to the editing bay, and cut it together exactly as planned. And Chandler notes that when they watched it, it made absolutely zero sense.
None.
It was completely incomprehensible.
This is a phenomenal example of the collision between artistic vision and the laws of physics.
Yeah. Why did the storyboards fail so badly?
Because storyboards are two-dimensional static representations.
Okay.
When you try to translate a static drawing of a jet into a moving image of a jet in a featureless blue sky, you lose all spatial continuity.
Explain spatial continuity in this context for me. Like, why is it so hard for the audience to follow?
Sure. In a normal dialogue scene, you have the 180-degree rule.
Right.
The camera stays on one side of an invisible line between two actors, so the audience always knows actor A is on the left and actor B is on the right.
Mm-hmm. It grounds the geography of the scene.
Exactly. In the sky, there is no line. There are no walls, no furniture, and often no clouds to provide a point of reference.
Just blue void.
Just blue. If a jet is banking hard to the right, but the camera plane is also banking hard to the right at the exact same speed, the jet looks like it's sitting perfectly still on screen.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, if you cut from a jet flying left to a jet flying right, the audience has no idea if they're flying toward each other or away from each other.
The geometry of the scene collapses.
It completely collapsed.
So they are sitting in the editing bay, looking at footage that essentially looks like gray triangles floating randomly in a blue void.
Basically, yeah.
You can't tell who is winning, who is losing, or where anyone is. Chandler points out that they had to completely scrap the storyboard plan.
Just throw it in the trash.
Yeah, and go entirely back to the drawing board to recut the footage just to create a basic, coherent narrative of who was shooting at who.
And here's the detail from the review that reveals the true desperation of that salvage operation.
I love this part.
Chandler notes that every single usable shot of the jets fighting is in the final movie.
I want everyone listening to let that sink in. Every single usable shot.
There is no surplus.
None.
There is no alternate take of a dogfight sitting in a vault somewhere.
That is wild.
If the camera was in focus and the jet was somewhere in the frame, they used it.
Wow.
They were constructing the climax of a major blockbuster with the absolute barest minimum of raw material.
Thinking about this from an investigative standpoint, it is like trying to publish a massive thousands of words expose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But right before your deadline, a gust of wind blows half your notebook out the window.
A nightmare.
Absolute nightmare. You can't call your sources back. You just have to sit there, look at the fragmented, disjointed sentences you have left, and figure out how to stitch them together so the reader doesn't realize you're missing half the story.
Exactly.
You rely on formatting, pacing, and sheer willpower to make it flow.
And that is exactly how the editing style of Top Gun was born.
Necessity.
Yes, it wasn't born out of a brilliant, avant-garde artistic vision. It was born out of sheer terror in the editing room. Because they didn't have long, continuous, perfectly choreographed tracking shots of jets fighting, they were forced to piece together micro moments of action.
A 1-second shot of a wing banking.
Exactly. A half-second shot of a pilot's eyes in a mask, a 2-second shot of a radar screen.
Mm-hmm.
By aggressively stitching these tiny fragments together, they accidentally created a frantic, incredibly fast-paced rhythm.
They accidentally invented the modern action sequence.
Yes, they mirrored the quick-cut, highly kinetic visual language of the MTV music videos of the era simply because they had no other choice.
Wow.
The tension you feel while watching those dogfights isn't just the narrative tension of Maverick fighting the enemy.
Right.
It is the subconscious tension of the editors fighting for their lives to make the footage hold together.
That is such a profound way to look at it. And that chaotic pacing bled into the rest of the movie, too.
Oh, totally.
Chandler points out that the film is riddled with completely bizarre tone shifts and hard cuts on the ground.
So many hard cuts.
There's no smooth transition between emotional states. For example, he talks about the opening sequence.
The credits.
Yeah. You have Harold Faltermeyer's brilliant atmospheric single-instrument synthesizer score playing over the credits. It's moody. It's building this incredible tension on the aircraft carrier deck.
It's a great piece of music.
It is. And then, with zero transition, no fade, no audio bridge, it just violently hard cuts into screaming 80s rock and roll. Boom! Danger zone.
It is an auditory shock to the system.
Yes.
And Chandler highlights another perfect example of this narrative whiplash.
Oh, the bird.
The bird. He points to an early sequence where Maverick pulls a completely juvenile, ridiculous maneuver in the sky, the vertical maneuver where he is inverted above another plane.
What Chandler calls the bird and a camera joke.
Right. It is sitcom-level humor.
Very sitcom.
It is light, it is silly, And the film immediately, violently hard cuts from that punchline straight to an intense scene of another pilot having a massive career-ending emotional meltdown. Yes, it's like someone literally changed the channel on your television.
You are watching a lighthearted comedy, and a millisecond later, you're watching a heavy psychological drama. And this wasn't just a byproduct of a director who didn't understand tone. It was the result of the studio panicking late in the game.
Right.
Chandler details how the studio watched a rough cut of the film and realized the romantic arc between Maverick and Charlie simply didn't have enough weight.
The action was there, but the romance felt thin.
Exactly. So they ordered extensive late-stage reshoots to manufacture chemistry.
And this is where the logistics of filmmaking crash headfirst into reality.
Yeah.
When you call actors back months after principal photography has wrapped, they have moved on. They are living different lives, often working on different projects.
And the continuity errors that resulted from this are legendary.
Unbelievable.
Chandler points out the famous elevator scene, which was one of these late additions. In this scene, Tom Cruise's hair is suddenly much longer, wet, and styled entirely differently than it is in literally the previous and subsequent scenes.
Just completely different hair.
And Kelly McGill is inexplicably wearing a hat.
Indoors. In an elevator.
Now, as a journalist, I love a good cover-up, right? And this is a terrible one. Why is she wearing a hat in an elevator?
Why?
Because she had already started filming a completely different movie, Made in Heaven, and had cut and dyed her hair dark brown.
Oh, wow.
They just threw a hat on her, kept the lighting dark, and prayed the audience wouldn't notice.
But here's the brilliant paradox. The audience largely didn't care.
No.
Or if they did notice, it didn't pull them out of the experience.
Why do you think that is?
Because the emotional momentum of the scene carried the structural weight. They were patching holes in the boat with duct tape while the boat was already speeding across the water.
I like that analogy.
But the reason that duct tape held, the reason we cared about the romance despite the obvious continuity errors, and the reason we cared about the dogfights despite the chaotic geography is because of the people inside the cockpits.
Exactly. All the flashy editing, all the killer synthesizers, and all the frantic reshoots wouldn't have worked, wouldn't have mattered if the audience wasn't emotionally invested in the characters.
Which brings us to a part of Chandler's review that I think is incredibly important.
His focus on the ensemble.
Yes.
Yeah.
His focus on the unsung ensemble cast.
It is incredibly easy, retrospectively, to view Top Gun purely as a Tom Cruise vehicle.
Oh, of course. His star power is blinding.
Blinding. And his dynamic with Val Kilmer's Iceman is so iconic that they create a massive shadow that obscures the rest of the production. But Chandler makes a crucial point. People completely forget how stacked the supporting cast was.
He calls it a before-they-were-stars roster.
And looking at the list, it's staggering.
It really is.
You have Meg Ryan in a small but absolutely pivotal emotional role, years before she became the undisputed queen of 90s romantic comedies.
Right.
You have Tim Robbins, who would go on to star in The Shawshank Redemption, one of the most acclaimed films of all time, just hanging out in the intro and outro of the film.
The chill in there.
Yeah. You have Anthony Edwards playing Goose, laying the groundwork for the massive television stardom he would achieve on ER in the 90s. You have Adrian Pazar, who later anchored the hit show Heroes in the 2000s.
And the foundation of the cast is built on veteran character actors who provide a tremendous amount of necessary gravity to the absurd situations.
All the veterans.
You have Tom Skerritt bringing legitimate patriarchal weight.
Viper.
Yes. You have Michael Ironside bringing his trademark intensity. You have James Tolkien, who everyone immediately recognizes as the bald principal from Back to the Future.
Oh, yes. Strickland.
Right, bringing immense authority. You have Clarence Gilliard, who went on to staple roles in Die Hard and Walker, Texas Ranger.
I look at that roster, and it's like walking through a museum and looking at a famous portrait, only to suddenly realize that the background trees, the sky, and the grass were painted by Picasso, Monet, and Dali before they were famous.
That's a great way to describe it.
The background radiation of talent in this movie is so absurdly high that it subconsciously elevates every single scene.
It really does.
It's not just that they have recognizable faces.
Yeah.
It's that they are genuinely great actors making very smart, grounded choices in a movie that is otherwise incredibly heightened.
And Chandler highlights how that individual talent coalesced into incredible ensemble chemistry.
Yeah.
You don't just accept the premise that Maverick and Goose are flight partners. You fundamentally believe they are brothers.
Oh, complete.
You believe in their shared history. But the review goes deeper than just praising the chemistry. Chandler discusses the highly underappreciated dramatic depth of the protagonist himself.
Mavericks.
Maverick is often reduced to a caricature of an arrogant 80s action hero, but there is actual psychological architecture there.
Yes. And this is where the movie is actually much smarter than it gets credit for. Maverick isn't just a cocky jerk because he thinks it's cool. Chandler points out that Maverick is driven by deep, unresolved trauma regarding his father.
Duke Mitchell.
Duke Mitchell. His father was a brilliant pilot who went down in combat under classified, whispered about circumstances.
The mystery.
Maverick is flying under the shadow of a disgraced family name. He is reckless because he is desperately, relentlessly trying to prove himself to the ghost of a father he can never reach.
It is a classic literary trope, the son attempting to rectify the sins or failures of the ghost father.
Hamlet in a jet.
Exactly. Because his father is absent and his legacy is tainted, Maverick is essentially a man without a country, even while serving in the military.
Wow, yeah.
He has no family structure, which is why he imprints so heavily onto Goose and Goose's family.
That makes perfect sense.
Goose isn't just his radar intercept officer. Goose is his surrogate family unit.
Which makes his bravado tragic rather than just annoying. You understand why he pushes the envelope, why he disobeys orders, and why he can't control his own worst instincts.
Right.
He is operating from a place of deep, unhealed grief.
And that psychological profile is what makes his conflict with the primary antagonist so incredibly compelling.
Iceman.
Yes. Chandler points out a truth about the screenplay that completely upends the traditional 80s movie formula.
What's that?
Iceman is right.
Okay, now, I want to push back on this a little bit.
What do you feel like?
Because while Chandler says Iceman is right, let's look at Iceman's actual behavior.
Sure.
Iceman constantly belittles him. He literally bites at the air at him in the locker room.
The chomp.
The chomp. He actively tries to psych Maverick out before training flights.
Yeah.
If Iceman is the ultimate professional, how is acting like a schoolyard bully in the locker room productive leadership?
That is a completely fair challenge. We have to separate Iceman's interpersonal execution from his tactical assessment.
Okay, explain that.
Interpersonally, Iceman is arrogant and abrasive. But tactically, his worldview is flawlessly accurate.
Fair.
Chandler points out that the movie gives Val Kilmer's character a completely valid, fact-based platform. Iceman legitimately sees Maverick as a danger to himself and to every other pilot in the air. Maverick breaks the rules of engagement, abandons his wingman to chase personal glory, and flies unpredictably.
And in a military context, unpredictability is lethal.
Exactly.
So you're saying that while Iceman might be a jerk about it,
yeah.
His core thesis that Maverick is unsafe to fly with is empirically proven by Maverick's own actions on screen.
Precisely. It forces a very sophisticated kind of critical thinking onto the audience.
How so?
In your heart, you are rooting for Maverick because he is the charismatic, damaged protagonist. He has the brilliant smile and the cool motorcycle.
Right.
But in your analytical brain, you know Iceman is the voice of reason. If you were an actual fighter pilot going into actual combat, you would want Iceman flying on your wing, not Maverick.
Oh, 100%. I want the guy who follows the rules.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant tension to embed in a popcorn movie. Usually the antagonist is just a villain who wants to beat the hero to satisfy his own ego.
Like in a sports movie.
Right. Here, the antagonist wants to beat the hero to prevent the hero from accidentally killing someone.
Yes.
You want Maverick to win the trophy, but you also desperately want him to grow up and realize that the guy he hates actually has a point.
And giving the characters that level of fleshed out, relatable worldview is what ultimately grounds the high-flying spectacle in real human emotion.
Which brings us to the ultimate thesis of Chandler's review. So what does this all mean?
Okay.
When you have these incredibly well-motivated characters played by a once-in-a-generation cast, it creates an emotional safety net.
Right.
And that safety net is what completely saves the film from its own broken narrative structure.
Because the structure is, frankly, bizarre.
It is, because when Chandler zooms out and looks at the actual plot geometry of the movie in his final verdict, it is shockingly bare.
The structural breakdown he provides is fascinating. If you strip away the vibes, the music, and the aerial acrobatics, the skeleton of the story is incredibly strange. Chandler points out that the movie is essentially just two bookends taking place on an aircraft carrier.
Right. You have the opening skirmish with the MiGs, and you have the final skirmish.
And everything else in between is just a prolonged training camp montage.
It's just guys going to school and competing for points.
Literally just school.
And the villains.
Yeah.
They are completely, entirely undefined.
Yeah, we know nothing about them.
We don't know what country they're from. We don't know what their geopolitical motivations are. We don't know why they are flying into our airspace.
They're just bad guys.
They are literally just faceless bogeys in black helmets flying black jets. There is no Hans Gruber. There is no Darth Vader.
Which works, ironically, because the true antagonist of the film isn't the foreign pilots.
Who is it?
The true antagonist is Maverick's own internal trauma and recklessness. Once he overcomes his fear of re-engaging after Goose's death, the narrative arc of the film is essentially complete. He has conquered his demon. But, as Chandler notes, the genre demands a physical climax.
Right. You can't end an 80s action movie with the hero simply graduating from school and feeling better about himself.
You need an explosion.
So you get the tacked-on third act.
Oh.
Chandler points out how incredibly clunky this final showdown is.
But he's very sudden.
Extremely. The school year ends, the personal arcs are wrapped up, and suddenly, completely out of nowhere, there is a manufactured international crisis. The pilots are immediately shipped back out to the exact same aircraft carrier to shoot down some faceless jets.
Mechanically, it is a structural anomaly.
Yeah.
It functions as a pressure release valve for the audience. The audience has been watching these pilots train for 2 hours. They need to see them execute those skills in a real-world scenario to feel satisfied. Chandler admits that if he were analyzing this purely as a screenwriter, he would change that structure entirely because it is logically very clunky.
But then he immediately pivots and admits the hardest truth of all.
Which is?
If he had fixed the structure, if he had smoothed out the edges and made the plot logically perfect, the movie wouldn't be as good.
And that right there is the absolute magic of flaws in art.
It's amazing.
It is the ultimate paradox of creative endeavor. Sometimes a perfect script one that hits every beat of the hero's journey flawlessly, has zero continuity errors, and resolves every plot thread logically ends up being completely sterile.
It lacks a pulse.
We have all seen highly polished, perfectly structured movies that we forget the moment we leave the theater.
Totally. And then you have Top Gun.
Right.
It breaks the rules of narrative structure. It has massive pacing issues. It features violent tonal whiplash.
It relies on continuity errors that you can literally see from space.
It was born from a director pitching a psychological war film and a studio demanding a music video. And yet, it works on every single level that matters to the human heart.
It works because of sheer, undeniable emotional momentum.
Yeah.
The kinetic energy of the editing, born out of the desperation of having no usable footage, combines with the primal driving force of the soundtrack and the undeniable charisma of the cast to create a wave.
A wave, exactly.
And that wave simply washes right over the structural cracks in the foundation. You don't care that Kelly McGillis is suddenly wearing a hat in an elevator because you are too busy feeling the sheer velocity of the film.
I find that so incredibly encouraging.
It is.
It is so liberating to realize that art doesn't have to be perfect to be impactful.
Not at all.
You don't have to follow a formula to create something that people will obsess over and watch a bajillion times, as Chandler says.
Right.
Which perfectly sets up his final score for the film.
Yes, his final verdict captures this duality perfectly.
Sean Chandler gives Top Gun an A- on his pure entertainment scale and a 9.5 out of 10 overall.
Very high praise.
And he provides a very clear, nuanced caveat. It is not a flawless, timeless, cinematic masterpiece of high art. But it is a phenomenal, quintessential, all-time great 1980s classic.
It is a deeply fair assessment. He evaluates the film for exactly what it is trying to be, rather than penalizing it for what it never attempted to be.
Exactly. So let's take a breath and look at the massive journey we have just been on today.
It's been quite a ride.
We started with a kid getting physically kicked out of his living room by panicking parents, spinning vinyl records on his floor, and genuinely believing that Tom Cruise was a chart-topping pop star.
Right.
And we followed that thread of nostalgia all the way back to a set where an insane pitch of apocalypse, now with jets, somehow morphed into a stitched-together, desperately reshot, beautifully chaotic masterpiece.
It's unbelievable when you summarize it like that.
A movie that accidentally defined the fast-cut editing style of an entire decade, starring an unbelievable roster of Hollywood's future A-list, all while the director and his rogue brother allegedly ignored the studio brass firing them.
It stands as a towering testament to the unpredictable, often miraculous alchemy of the filmmaking process.
It truly is a miracle we ever get to watch anything at all. I want to thank you, the listener, for coming along on this deep dive with us today.
Yes, thank you.
The next time you sit down to watch a movie and you spot a glaring continuity error, a water glass that moves, or a hairstyle that magically changes, don't just roll your eyes.
Right.
Take a second to appreciate the absolute chaos, the dueling egos, the logistical nightmares, and the desperate editing room miracles that go into getting any story onto that screen.
It makes you look at those flaws not as mistakes to be ridiculed, but as the visible scars of a creative battle.
Which leaves us with a final, broader thought.
Yes. If the greatest, most enduring pop culture touchstones of our entire lives are often the ones born from mistakes, miscommunications, and panicked reshoots, what does that tell us about our relentless obsession with perfection in our own daily lives? Maybe, sometimes, you don't need a flawless plan. Maybe you just have to hit the danger zone and see what happens.